Hello and welcome also from the product management side. So this is the What's New session of SAP Datasphere covering features and functions we introduced and updated in the first quarter of this year, so 2023. My name is Klaus-Peter Sauer and I walk you through the session here, and let's have a look at the agenda. So first of all, the launch of SAP Datasphere itself and the new components is a major block of this session here. Then we look at further updates in the modeling as well as data integration areas. Then the third section is looking at updates we delivered in the BW Bridge area. And then we round it off with updates on the command line interface, so the CLI, as well as the data marketplace. So let's have a look at the launch event of Datasphere and the new components in this first section. So I summarized, in case you haven't seen the launch event or haven't been aware where to find materials, etc. I've summarized this on this page here. So the video you see, that's the short What is Datasphere video on YouTube. Put the link there. Below you find some quick links to the Datasphere product page on sap.com, as well as on the community. Roadmap is an often asked topic, right? Where to find what's on the roadmap, and you find that on the Roadmap Explorer. We have frequently asked questions also on the community out there, the documentation, customer influence, all there to be looked at. And on the right hand side you find, in case you're interested specifically around that launch event, the replay, the press release, the different blogs which were accompanying the launch event, partner quotes, the customer testimonials, as well as the demo video for the launch and the solution brief. In the meantime, our colleagues from product management but also from other areas have already put out a good number of blogs around those new features, the catalog, the analytic model, replication flow, but also some new interesting ones about the intelligent lookup and the sample content out there. They are all at the community blogs and can be found here. But now let's have a look at the major components on the Datasphere, and the first one is the data catalog. And yeah, that's handled by Mona. So over to you, Mona.
Hello, my name is Mona Walia and I'm a product manager with HANA Database and Analytics team at SAP. I'm here today to talk about the new catalog capabilities that we have released as part of our SAP Datasphere launch. SAP Datasphere Catalog helps you discover, organize, and curate metadata and data so that you can drive data quality and data governance programs. Today, my demo will focus on the end consumer and how it answers key questions in the data to value journey. Let's begin. We are logged in to the SAP Datasphere tenant. The catalog is available as a menu item on the left-hand navigation, and there are three sections. The catalog, which is the main landing page experience, the tag hierarchies, and the monitoring. These two are only available to power users with catalog administrator role. Let's deep dive into the catalog landing page. The first question in the data to value equation is, where is the data? In the catalog, you'll find assets from your SAP Analytics Cloud system as well as SAP Datasphere tenant. In addition, there are terms which are used to express the business glossary and the business terminology used in the organization. We have KPIs, which are key performance indicators, and one can easily favorite any content and find it in the favorite section. There is a recent section as well, which will let you start your journey where you left off. All this information is easily accessible from a single place. There are tiles available which provide a nice browsing experience, and the view can be switched as well. Search is at the heart of the catalog discovery experience. User can initiate a broad-based search and then can further filter down the results using the options that have been provided by default, or also through the tags that can be managed by the power users. So in our case, we are going to filter by assets. I know that I'm looking for excellent data quality. So somebody has certified the quality as being excellent. And then I know it's a story that I am after. Now let's look at the story. The capabilities present in catalog asset detail help answer the second question that we have in this data to value journey, which is, can I trust this data? This is the asset detail for a story that has been extracted from the SAP Analytics Cloud system. I can see the metadata from the system has been extracted from my convenience. I can easily make out who has made changes to the system, who created the story, and when was it last modified, giving me an idea of whether this is fresh or stale report that I'm looking at. I can also look at the description that came from the source, and this can also be enriched in the catalog. Lineage is another important capability of the catalog. It helps us understand where the data came from and what impact it has if it was to be changed. In this example, we see there is a story based off an analytic model in SAP Datasphere tenant, which in turn has a sales delivery view with data coming from various sources. I can zoom into a full view of the entire lineage, and I can adjust the level at which I want to see the data. I can dig deeper and search to take a closer look at some of the relationships in this model. It's very important to assess the impact of any changes that you make to the data so that it doesn't impact the business and day-to-day work. Let's switch back to the overview and look at the terms, tags, and KPIs. These are important capabilities that will help describe the data the user is looking at. Glossary terms can be used to define any terms that need to be understood across the organization. Tag helps end user discover and search for the data that they are looking for faster. And KPIs establish a common understanding of the key performance indicators and how they are calculated in the system. Now let's look at the term SAP Business Partner. The terms can have a definition, and several keywords and synonyms can be attached to the same, which will help end users discover the term faster in the catalog search experience. Furthermore, the tags can help you annotate the asset. These tags can be predefined by the administrators according to metadata governance needs, and while enrichment, these can be selected for assignment to the particular data and analytic assets in the catalog. Similarly, for KPIs, in this case, we are looking at order value fiscal year. A definition can be provided for the KPI, and thresholds can also be defined to indicate what is considered to be a good goal achievement and what is considered to be a critical scenario and needs to be looked at. This provides a common understanding of what KPI means, and let us say whether the KPI has been achieved or not. The KPIs can be clubbed into various categories like financial KPIs, sustainability related KPIs, and so on. These features combined help build understanding of the data asset in hand and provide additional context, which is very important to assess whether this asset is fit for purpose or not. Final piece to the equation is, how do I consume this data? Catalog provides an easy way to jump to the asset at hand, in this case, the SAP Analytics Cloud story. The same is true for any other asset in SAP Analytics Cloud system as well as the SAP Datasphere tenant as well. All in all, we saw how a data consumer can discover data, make sense of the data, and then can finally consume this for their day-to-day data needs. Other capabilities that are available to catalog administrators is ability to manage the hierarchical tags that we saw were attached to the assets, and also monitoring the metadata extraction that is happening from the SAP Analytics Cloud and the SAP Datasphere tenant. In addition, administrators will see a couple of more options on their home screen to manage the business glossary, as well as the KPIs. For example, they can edit the template to specify the necessary fields for maintaining metadata governance, as well as in KPIs, they can manage the categories so that when the assets are being enriched, the governed metadata is being used to describe them. This concludes our demo of the catalog capabilities in SAP Datasphere for an end consumer and how catalog can be used to unlock potential for your enterprise data. Thank you.
Thanks, Mona. Let's have a look at the next component, the Analytic Model, which was also delivered with release 2023-06 and the launch of the SAP Datasphere. What is it about? It's about a multi-dimensional analytical modeling capabilities with very good OLAP functionalities. So you can create calculated restricted key figures, exception aggregation, pruning is integrated, as well as nested dimensions are supported, time dependencies, and more. Important to note, there's also a migration support for your existing analytical data sets, so you don't have to recreate everything from scratch. Here you can use that kind of functionality. And also important to mention is the very rich preview function, which we have built in. So the one which you know so far is very tabular. You can do some filtering, sorting, but it's not very flexible that you can show different things in columns and rows. That's what you can do here with dragging and dropping, rearranging, flexible filters and sorting mechanisms, and display hierarchies, and use the preview even without having deployed your analytical model. And it's also using the same standard control as SAP Analytics Cloud, so you see the same thing and don't need to create a story for checking the values, how they look in the reporting tool. On the bottom, I also put a nice blog series which is out there on the SAP community for focusing on different parts of the analytical model. Very good information there. But let's have a look at the demo, and that's done by Jan. Over to you.
The Analytic Model in SAP Datasphere supports multidimensional and semantically rich analytic modeling to answer business questions easier, faster, and more efficiently. To create an analytic model, launch the Data Builder in SAP Datasphere and choose Create. First, we need to choose which data source to put to the center of the analysis. The data source contains all measures and contains associations to other analytic entities like here product, opportunity, or controlling area. For each of them, we can decide which other reachable entities we might want to include into the model, like details about the product manager or about the expected closing date of the opportunity. Analytic models allow users to add custom calculations, like, for example, average price, defined as value over quantity. We can add restricted measures or complex calculations like count distinct or measures that leverage exception aggregation. Let's add, for example, a counter for products with value greater than 1 million in revenue. Modelers can diligently create the user experience of their colleagues by also deciding what data to collect from end users via prompts. Collected data can be used for calculations, filtering, or for time dependency. As an example, let's filter the current report on the controlling area of the user. Modelers can preview the result of their modeling efforts at all times. By choosing Preview in the upper right corner, the current model is launched and can be inspected. As expected, the filtering dialog comes up. Let's filter on SAP SE for now. On the initial screen, all measures are highlighted. The preview allows for rich slice and dice, for filtering, for adjustment of the presentation itself, or for choosing the hierarchy defined on the data. Let's deploy our object and inspect its relationship to other objects in SAP Datasphere. As a first-class citizen of the design time repository of SAP Datasphere, the Analytic Model enjoys full integration into value-adding tools like the impact and lineage analysis shown, change management in the edit tools, as well as transportability via the Analytics Content Network. As a final step, let's launch the SAP Analytics Cloud and see how data consumers will experience the Analytic Model. We create a new story of type optimized design experience and add the Analytic Model as a data source. SAC now reads the metadata of the Analytic Model and, as expected, prompt the user to filter on controlling area, and again we choose SAP SE as the controlling area of interest. If we now add a new story widget, like a table for example, the Analytic Model measures are automatically shown. As in SAP Datasphere, We can now use any of the model dimensions for drill down. If we choose the product manager, for example, its hierarchy is also leveraged automatically. As you saw, the Analytic Model in SAP Datasphere allows modelers to leverage the rich semantics to prepare a multidimensional consumption model that makes it easy for business users to get their questions answered easily, fast, and efficiently.
Thanks, Jan. And replication flow is the next topic, which we delivered with the launch of Datasphere. And what is it about? So it's the use case for this is really mass data replication from one source system to a target system. So the focus is on one-to-one replication. So there are simple projections and filters possible, but not complex transformations. That's what the data flow is more used for. And this offers, of course, an integrated component into the monitoring, and it supports initial load as well as delta load. So what are the sources and target systems currently supported? Because this replication flow component is not only limited to load data into Datasphere, but also other systems. And the initial setup here with source systems and target systems is as follows. We support S/4HANA on-prem as well as cloud-based systems. We support Business Suite as well as SLT, BW systems and BW for HANA source systems, HANA Cloud as well as HANA on-prem systems, and Microsoft Azure SQL in the initial setup what we have. On the target system side, we support, of course, SAP Datasphere as a target, HANA on-prem, as well as HANA Cloud and data lake files. This list will grow over time, but this is the initial setup, which was delivered with 2023-06 earlier in March. So what else? If you create a replication flow, there are certain things, and those depend also a little bit on the source system and the target system, depending on file types and some aspects. Parameters are only there for specific file types, like for JSON, the orient, or the file compression for Parquet files. So there you can add several tasks there on a source and a target data set. You can select the load type, can create some filters or mappings or projections. That's optional. But without talking too much about it, let's directly have a look at the system, and I will show you that in the demo. So in Datasphere, you find a new tile in the data builder, which is replication flow. Let's create a new one here and enter into the UI. So first thing, you select a source system connection. Let's create one on the HANA system. We can select a container. So in this case, that means a schema or an HDI container. Let's take our demo schema here. And next step is add some source objects. So that's why we need to select the different tables we want to use for this replication flow. As I mentioned, this can be for one or multiple tables. So first select a table like here, the sales orders. We can also take others like the products, for example, addresses, and let's say country and region here. We click on next, and now we can add that selection and check if these tables support all the different requirements needed. We're fetching some information and we see, okay, there's no issue on the initial check. We could add here some projections if we like, and from a setting perspective, what I mentioned earlier, initial load and delta is supported. Let's leave it for now on the initial load only. We can also, if the table exists, do a truncate, that the table is emptied. Now there's no target available. let's add targets for those tables. So we can select here in the first step the target system. So let's select our Datasphere system. You see automatically my demo space is selected, and default values, the exact same table name is shown. Let's quickly rename then into new. So quickly did this for all the target tables, added the new in front of it. So let's save the replication flow. First, we have to give it a name. Let's say KP demo. Oops. Deploy it. Now that it's deployed, we can actually execute it and run it. We can also go to the monitor to check what the status is and see more details in the data integration monitor. We can refresh. So now all 4 are completed, and we basically initiated here a replication flow. I used the HANA system. Of course, you could use other source systems as well. For example, I set one run up here for the iCustomer CDS table of a HANA S/4HANA cloud-based system that's flexible with the various different sources supported. So next to those major components which we delivered with Datasphere, there are also, of course, smaller features and functions in the different areas, like here in modeling, where we introduced a quite good efficiency enhancement with an easy navigation to related entities in different editors. So when you're in the graphical editor and you want to go to a source table or source view, you don't have to go back and go into the new view. You can directly select that here, open it in a new tab, and then switch going back and forward, also with like associations and in mappings, etc., where we introduce then hyperlinks to navigate there. Let me just quickly show you that in the system. So in this graphical view, for example, if you scroll down, for example, here to the associations, right, I can open it up, and you see here, yeah, the navigation path to the time dimension in this example. And also if we want to create like a new association, we find these hyperlinks also here, where we can go to the source structure, check what they are about, etc. Same thing here on these items used in your model, where you find then the open in new tab function. There's also already a follow-up function to the Analytic Model, where we now support also shared objects to be used in analytic models. So if you look at the system, what's the difference? You now find next to views and tables also this shared objects area in your Analytic Model editor, and where you can reuse shared objects in a similar way like you do with existing local tables and views. And that's a short update here on the Analytic Model. The next topics on the data integration side will be delivered by Hannes. Over to you.
With this user story, we brought notifications to task chains. You have now the ability to configure an email notification that we will send out if the successful execution of a task chain, a failed execution of the task chain, or any execution results of a task chain. You can notify the users with a custom message. We bring out default messages, and within these messages, you can use variables to write your text and include information from the runtimes, like the link to the data integration monitor. You can use multiple recipients to notify them, and you can use the user base, so whatever is configured as business users in DWC, as well as custom entered email addresses. And yeah, we will send out the notification for you. How is it done? So when you create, so how is it done? You need to create a task chain. You then pick anything, and in your task chain properties, you have down on the bottom the email notification settings. It's currently turned off. When I turn it on with any type of settings, I do get the setup with the email subject and the default text that we ship, and you can modify the text freely. And if you want to see what type of variables we support, we basically support all of these, either technical names or business names of task chains, the statuses, the users, the UI links, start time, end times, everything you hopefully will need to inform the customer and have them an email that they can work with. The idea is that you can integrate this into either directly to your users, sending it out to them, or have it integrated into ticket tools that accept emails. One thing to notice, and that is important to understand, the object needs to be deployed in order to have the email recipient box become active. And the email recipient box is a runtime setting, because we do not know that the same business users exist in multiple systems. Therefore, the email settings itself are part of the design time and need to be deployed, but the email recipients are part of the runtime and can only be configured once added. And you have the options to either go through the users, and you can search here. Like I want to send an email to myself. Or you have the options in others to pick some kind of test email to send it to. Obviously, I would send now an email to a domain that is remote from you, and you see it, we can actually not do this. It says only email addresses from the domain sap.com. So you cannot just send out emails to spam all others. It's a protection against spam. The domain that is shown here is derived from the owner's email. So the tenant owner's email domain will be used to allow to configure any other email. With that, we basically restricted that you can only send it within your company. We're not allowed to provide a feature just to send it out to anybody. And you also see we have a limit of 20 email recipients in order not to spam, because the emails will be sent from an SAP email server, and we do not want to end up in any kind of spam lists. And therefore, this is a little bit more protected, either business users or email addresses that have the same domain as the tenant owner. And also it's limited to 20. If you need more than 20, I would anyway recommend to use distribution lists in your email system instead of having DWC sent to a large number of users. So once you have configured it, did I not choose anything? You have configured it where you want to send it to, or multiple ones. Again, deploy the changes. And now, as soon as the process chain will run, yes, once it's deployed, I can start running it. Now the task chain will run, and once it's completed, I will receive an email. Yeah. Here is now the email that I've received. It takes a little bit of time for this to process and end, and the email to send, and obviously my email server to process it and put it into my inbox. But you can see you're actually getting it from an reply@SAP address. To know where it comes from, we have the configured, but obviously the variables were replaced subject, and the body that you configured. The body is the upper part of this email. We always attach, again, in order to tell who is responsible for this email, a footer to this, just to tell okay, Guido Eichmann in this case here is our tenant owner. And yes, there's a task chain 1 in a PM demo that has sent from the integration space this. So if you consider this spam, because we can't unsubscribe actively, you have then to reach out to Guido, who should then remove you from these types of settings. And as you can see, you can configure this, you can use the variables, as well as you can obviously, like the links, you can click on the link, and then you will come to the task chain monitor, which just opens up. So if you need to take actions, this is specifically the idea for either tickets or for administrators who had a failed task chain and want to check in the monitor very quickly what has happened, so they have a direct connection to it. Yes, and here we now see the log, and obviously mine was completed because I set the chain to send me emails with on any end, but if it's an error, you could go in here, restore, find the error, see the problem, and solve hopefully the issue fairly quickly. In this user story, we enabled the partition-wise refresh of view partitions. So what has changed is you do not need to reload entire views with all of its partition, but now you can select single views and reload that single view as needed. You still have the ability to reload selected views through the locking mechanism, but this is to interactively on demand reload a single partition should you have experienced errors in a partition or social data have changed below in one of the data that goes into a partition, so that you have the ability to simply update without having to drop everything. How does that look in the system? It's very simple. You go into the data integration monitor to a view that has partitions like the one that I have, and you switch to the partitions tab. And in the partition tabs, you see all the partitions. There's nothing selected. The load data button is grayed out. And if you select partitions, you see that the load data button becomes activated by clicking. So it will create a new load that will then, you can see it in the logs basically. So it's running, it generates a new load now on today's February day. And it will reload those 2 selected partitions and not all of them. So you see just the 2 of them. And it's just to simplify, should you find an error and fix it without having to drop everything, which might become handy if you have very large and complex views that need to be persisted. And that is all for this little story.
With Wave 7, we enhanced the functionality of the view analyzer to show you more of the memory consumption and rows processed, as well as the connections and adapters you're using and capabilities, and whether there are statistics or not in our view analyzer. How do you find this? If you are in the data integration monitor and you go into a view, You have under view persistency now the analyzer function, and the analyzer will basically run through it. If you can run it with or without memory consumption, if you do it with memory consumption, it will actually execute the full view like the view persistency it would. And you can, if you don't know how much memory it takes, you can limit the memory consumption of that view during the test so it will not execute. If we do this and we are running the analyzer, as soon as it returns, I see my typical task of execution, but I have here now this entry tab where I can log into. And now I'm going to see how this view was executed. And you can even look at the lineage graph. So in my case, actually, it's very simple. I have a basic remote table and have an aggregate up to sales order level. And then I have my sales order items basically joined together. But if you're looking at it, we see basically these two structures, my view analyzer view, which I'm using, my sales order view. I have how much peak memory it consumed, so what is the maximum that it used, how much rows it processed, and how long it took. So we can actually see, okay, the aggregate I built here was fairly quick with 3 seconds, and the majority of the time was spent in this view I'm currently looking at. And nothing is persisted. So one of the options for it I could make is, okay, well, let's persist this view. Also here, I would get additional messages, and here you can look, you will see additional messages, how much joins and unions were in here. And yeah, we will enhance this feature further more by having more messages if there's anything that we can advise on. In addition, we will also are currently working on an extension that the view analyzer will also give you the plan with. Should there be no statistics for a remote table, it will actually warn you here in this screen of on the message screen that it has no statistics. It will give you a little warning sign here. You can also rerun multiple ones at the same time by selecting multiple ones and starting the analyzer, and then it will run them again should you have made changes that you want to have. You basically tried ones and see how much records or process and memory consumption there are in there. This was it for this first story, but I would like to show you also a second story immediately because we're in here, and this has to do with the partitioning piece. If you define partitions now, you have the option to suggest good columns basically. And when you do this, it will basically evaluate the columns and will rank those columns in an order. So basically from top to bottom, which ones are suitable for partitioning.
With this user story, we extended the remote table monitor by one column and to show you the latest change that is transferred in real-time mode. So this only applies to real-time replication. So if we have real-time replication, we will add what is the latest change that has been transferred over into DWC, just to give you an understanding how big is the latency and how much records you might still, not how much, but basically how old the records are that you are still missing. We can see this in, again, the data integration monitor, this time on the remote tables tab. And if we have entities which are in real time, we can see here now the latest change date field. We also see this in the detailed screen. Here in the detailed screen. And what this means is that the latest change in the source system, so the latest record change that has been transferred, happened at 12 o'clock 29 minutes and 14 seconds of today. So this is basically the newest record we have in the system. So everything that was booked after that into the source system has not been transferred yet. This latest change date will only update on change. So we can't tell you that we have everything that is up until maybe 5 minutes ago if there was nothing happened. We can only tell you basically the latest change that we have received and then have booked this away into our HANA. Also, if you just initialize the system, you won't see a latest change. There actually needs to be happen a change after we switched over from the initial load to the subscription. Only then we are able to update this latest change date. So keep in mind, it won't happen just after initial load. You need to do at least one change. And then if there's no change happening, this time will not progress. So it will stay on the latest that we have seen changes, because we don't know if nothing happened and it hasn't been sent, or if there's really not intended to be nothing happening. So that is not there. And we have, together with, I think we showed it the last time, the rows here, or the columns with the number of records. So you also have an indicator of how much records are there. So in case you're comparing the total number of records between those two tables, or in the source and here, you also have an indicator of what is missing. And ideally they match here up to latest change, and then everything else, those are the ones that are missing. We have extended the scheduling option for small options, but hopefully it will become quite useful, and that is the pause option. So now you can pause a schedule, meaning the schedule will not be executed until unpaused. Today you have to, or before this, you had to either delete the schedule in order to temporarily suspend execution, or you had to do a little trickery with the time range selection by setting the end date in the past to pause the execution. So whenever you need a temporarily pause of execution of schedules, for example, for transport windows, because you want to bring in a larger transport which otherwise would hit maybe views which are currently being executed and therefore locked and cannot then import. So if you do achieve things like that, we have introduced the pause functionality. How can this be reached? It's fairly simple, actually. So whenever you have a schedule that is executed, actually started right from the beginning, but if you edit your schedule, you have here the little slider of the pause functionality, and by setting it, it will pause the execution. And we can see that the refresh frequency now is set to paused. To unpause, you simply do the same thing again and save. From now on, it will be executed again. This feature itself seems to be quite cumbersome to reach, but this is just a prerequisite which we released in order to enhance the mass operations, which is a thing we're working on. That means you can select one or many objects in here and then execute the pause and unpause to stop entire spaces if you need, as well as we're planning to have in the tenant management section an ability to pause tenant-wide. But we need this pause feature itself, so within the pacemaker, to pause jobs in order to either mass enable it or tenant-wide enable pause. And this is now the preparation for pause. I know it looks a little bit cumbersome today, but it will improve in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hannes. And now let's look at the updates on the BW Bridge side, where we have extended the existing sizing report. Many of you might know for the BW for HANA sizing with the BW Bridge as an additional output component. There's a nice blog out there from Dominic, which describes exactly those details. So another important part which was delivered with release 03 this year is the import metadata extension with single query imports. So what you now can do in addition, using that import wizard which was already there, reusing the semantic information, also import now queries. And let's have a look at it from a demo perspective, and Dominic will show us how to do that.
Let's jump directly into our use case. Inside of my Eclipse environment, I've connected a BW for HANA 2021, which is our sender or source system. Inside of the BW for HANA environment, we have created a simple data flow. Based on two advanced data store objects, sales order and sales order item, we've created a composite provider. Below of that, of course, we've also some master data in form of info objects, which are mapped inside of the composite provider. Let's quickly jump into. In this scenario, for example, you can see that we have there a simple join between the sales order and the sales order item. Beside of that, of course, we also have a direct association with the relevant info objects, for example, the product category, and of course, also the measures. On top of the composite provider, we have created a query, sales reporting without currency. And inside of the sheet definition, for example, we have different kind of key figures. So the net amount and the quantity, which are invisible. And of course, we also have a selection or restricted and calculated key figures on top. That means current year net amount, previous year net amount, and for example, the percentage deviation between the net amount of the current year and the previous year. And inside of the rows, we have our product category and a lot of free characteristics. And our goal is now to move the whole data flow here on the left-hand side together with the two advanced data store objects, the info objects, the composite provider, as well as the query to BW Bridge and run a model import in SAP Datasphere. We're easily logging on into the backend system, so jump into the logon, move into the transaction STC01, where we have the option to run a shell or remote conversion, but we will start with a shell conversion. Let's run the task list, and in the first step, it is always necessary to collect the scope. And inside of a scope, we're always starting from the highest object. And in our use case, of course, this is our composite provider. We will quickly collect the composite provider, click on save, and start running the task list. In the second step, it's necessary to define the scope a little bit more clearer. And under our composite provider, we have several info objects. And with this regards, of course, we also have to transfer all of the entry layer. That means the advanced data store objects below. And we also like to convert, as we already have mentioned before, our existing query, sales reporting without currency. Easily click on select. We've enabled this feature with BW Bridge 22.11, end of November last year. Now it is necessary to assign a package, and we're going to use the data challenge package and assign also a transport request. And then we can click on save and jump back into our task list, and we can start running the task list again. So afterwards, we're jumping from the scope definition phase into the prepare phase, where we're getting some hints. And in this check, for example, all the body elements as well as the authorization is checked. So we can jump over it, easily click on resolved, and start running the task list again. And then in a few seconds, we're getting the message that hopefully the run was successful. And now all the data flow or the BW artifacts are transferred from BW for HANA to BW Bridge. Inside of my Eclipse environment, I have also connected my BW Bridge. We can quickly jump into, and as you can see here now, the goal was to transfer the existing data flow together with my two advanced data store objects, the info objects, as well as the composite provider into BW Bridge. We can also go quickly into the scenario. So we really have the same output structure together with all the associated fields. And what you also can see is that the query on top of the composite provider is invisible. As I already have mentioned, in BW Bridge we don't have an OLAP engine, and now it is necessary to import the existing or the converted query inside of SAP Datasphere. So let's jump directly into our tenant, and we're moving into our space, and we'd like to import our query into the open SAP space. And here on the right hand side we have the option to import entities. And of course our connection type is BW Bridge, and we've already started from the target space, so we can jump over it. The next step is the connection, and of course the connection is also provided from SAP side, so you don't have anything to do here. Just select the connection, and then in the next step you are able to search exactly for the query which should be imported into your Datasphere tenant. And we'd like to import the query 02, so we can click on search. Oh, sorry, that was too fast. There it is. Then we can easily mark it, jump to the next step where we're getting an overview what kind of business builder and data builder artifacts will be created inside of my Datasphere tenant. So we're creating 12 data builder artifacts, so exactly all the dimensions for the info objects. And of course, on top of that, we're also creating all the business builder artifacts. We can start import and deploy, and in a few seconds we're getting the message, hopefully, that the import was successful. So I have already started the import, a few minutes left. So what we see here, for example, is exactly what I said a few seconds before. So we've created all the relevant views or dimensions on top of the info objects. And if we jump directly into the business builder, for example, you can see that there is a consumption model created and a perspective on top. So let's start directly jumping into the consumption. And from the consumption, we're jumping into the perspective, which is created on top. And the consumption reflects exactly our query, what we have seen before. So we exactly have the same measures here and all the attribute selection, and also those ones which were inside of my free characteristics. And now we can start using this perspective or the consumption using for reporting purposes with SAC.
Thank you, Dominic, for the demo, and now move on to the updates on the CLI and the Marketplace. So 3 new commands have been enhanced with the CLI in the past quarter. So early on, we added the list spaces command, something which was missing for automation to get the spaces from a particular tenant. Also on the database user side for password setting or resetting, this was added so to close a gap here. And just recently the command line interface was also enhanced for the data marketplace. So those commands to provide access to discover data profiles, data provider profiles, and data products are available with a bunch of commands. They are available on the documentation. Please check it out there. So the next topic is about context management that is newly introduced into the data marketplace component here. So in the context, you can define if data is shared for private or public purposes, so that defines the visibility of your product on the marketplace, who can see it, if it's only available in a private context or if it's publicly available for everyone accessing the data marketplace. So this is a very new, powerful feature, but let me use some additional slides here to visualize what we mean with a context. So all the data providers who define data products and which are used then by data consumers on the marketplace are by, since the data context management is now available, are automatically public data products, and they've been automatically migrated to that kind of context when we introduced the context management. And now what's new is that you, as a data provider, as an owner, you can define your own private data exchange context where you can invite consumers and define products to share with them. But you can also invite data providers. So those data providers could also share products within this private context, and they are not visible outside of the context on the public marketplace. So only within this specific context, consumers can consume data products offered to them in this private group. There are different use cases for this. And the first one is where you have a private data provider defining a product for a specific consumer, might also be a group of consumers. And in some cases, they also become or can become a data provider and give the data back. Maybe they changed it, adjusted it, created some new data out of it, some new insights, and share that back with the original data provider. So that's what we call the classical private data product scenario, right? There are other scenarios where we call it data shop scenarios. This is typically, if you think, for example, about public data providers like the government. They share specific data products which can only be defined by them and only be produced by them with specific groups of people, or organizations, right? So they define them, and that's the only place where you can get them is by these data providers. Another use case we see is having a data provider profile which is managed by multiple data providers. So not just one, but multiple providers can contribute, define data products in a specific private context and share that with certain consumers. That's basically a self-managed group, and that's also how we call the scenario here, the private data exchange with a self-managed group of people. But let's have a look at the system also, how the context management is seen there. So in the data sharing cockpit of the data marketplace, I have a sample data provider profile, and you now see this new tile here, context management. And if we go there, we see that I've created a KP private context. That means I can use this context, which is active, to share data with and invite other data providers. We've seen that on the slides. Give them access keys and add multiple of them, as well as, of course, members, meaning consumers of such a context. What else is important? So that's the context management itself. What we also see is that for the data products, of course, I have two here defined. And if you look at this listed data product, that's exactly what I defined as part of this context, which I just shown you. This is only privately visible, so only for members of that private context. and no one else can actually see this product. So it's not visible on the public data marketplace. And another area which is important to understand, that from a data provider perspective, let's go back to the data provider profile. That's also where I can define if I'm, as a data provider, want to act in a public or a private context or both, right? So I can actually define that in my data provider profile. In this case, I have set up only a private option, right? Could also act additionally in the public marketplace or both. As I said, that is up to you how you want to define that. And now, summing up here from what we've learned and what we newly introduced on the data marketplace, what are the key takeaways, right? So this context management now gives you control on the visibility of data products. So the data, the payload of a data product remains the same setup of free or licensed products is there. That didn't change. It's mainly about the visibility of the products. And so you can publish products in different contexts. So it can be one context only or multiple contexts. So that is possible. Also, as I mentioned and just showed you in the data provider profile, you can provide a profile privately and or publicly, so both in a combination is possible. Available since end of January, so that was release 03 where we delivered it, and also all data provider and data products which existed before that time are automatically transferred to the public context, and that enables basically private and also internal data exchange use cases. So private we introduced, internal is something to come in the future, which we are planning. And yeah, that is the context management on the data marketplace. What we also introduced in the meantime with release 05 is the inner tenant consumption with live access to data. So prior to this feature, all data products have been physically shipped from the provider tenant to the consumer tenant. Now, if the data provider is available within the same tenant, we can have an inner tenant consumption with live access, meaning we use basically data sharing as you know it as a vehicle to avoid physical data transfer if the data is already there. And that is a new feature also integrated here with the data marketplace. Before we close the session, let's have a look at our priorities for 2023, what's currently in development. And if you look at this slide here, looking at the top left, BW Bridge, we're working on non-cumulative key figure support, external hierarchies that's available in BW for HANA today. BW Bridge supports it, but not Datasphere. So we're working on to integrate that into the modeling area and the external hierarchy specifically. That's hopefully something we get within the next few months. You also see that on the top right box here on the new modeling features, support for external hierarchies. And if we stay with that box, you see folder support, also a very often requested feature to support folders, folder structures in the data builder. That's hopefully also coming soon within the next few months. Similar multi-fact modeling available in the business layer today, but not in the newly introduced analytic model. Also stacking support there. That's something what we're working on to extend it. And hopefully we get that within the next few months. Like always, given the development and testing goes fine. Another topic here, space-dependent permissions. where we're currently working on with more granular assignment of permissions per space, grouping of users and spaces, and the scheme API, which you see there, is probably a little further out, but nonetheless on our list. These topics also build on each other. So first we need to have the base concept in there, and that's hopefully delivered soon within the next few months. Other topics which you see here are probably a little further out. That's why I don't want to talk about them in detail. With that, we're at the end of our session for today. I thank all the speakers for preparing the content, and thanks for being with us, and have a great rest of the week. Hope you enjoyed it. Bye-bye.